Hello guys, welcome to another video. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite regions in the world, which is Central and Eastern Europe. Central and Eastern Europe, why is it one of the best regions to live in the world? If you're considering moving to another region, there are many tempting ones with amazing attributes to choose from. You have Southeast Asia with its delicious cuisine, friendly people and relentless nightlife. You have then Latin America with a low cost of living, tropical beaches and the proximity to the US. You also have Western Europe with its excellent healthcare and a state-of-the-art transport infrastructure. But in this video, we're not going to talk about any of these. We're going to talk about one of the best and most underrated regions in the world, Central and Eastern Europe. If you're not considering moving to Central and Eastern Europe already, after this video, you may actually think that it can be even a good idea to pack your stuff right now and go to the airport. So that's today's video, Central and Eastern Europe. Let's find out why it is one of the best places to live in the world. But before we start the usual talk, if you want to travel, move or invest abroad, hit the like button, check our other videos, book a consultation call with me, the link is in the description. Let's plan your immigration strategy together, and most importantly, subscribe! Let's start. The first advantage of living in Central and Eastern Europe is its safety, which is prevalent in almost all countries in the region, including large cities. Most big cities in Central and Eastern Europe are safer than large cities in Western Europe, and definitely much safer than most large cities in North America. As a matter of fact, some of the safest cities in the world are in Central and Eastern Europe. Examples like Zagreb and Ljubljana are just perfect. You can walk any time of the day or the night in almost all areas of the city without any problems. Even huge cities like Moscow or Budapest are much safer than cities with similar sizes in the West like Paris or London. But there are a few places that are actually safer than Central and Eastern Europe. They do exist, and a good example would be Japan, much safer than almost anywhere in the world. Now let's talk about the cost of living, which is another huge important advantage in Central and Eastern Europe. While this varies greatly in the region, the average cost of living in Central and specifically in Eastern Europe is way below Western Europe, the US, Australia, and highly developed cities in East Asia like Seoul or Singapore. This includes everything from real estate, whether you are renting or buying, to services, to groceries, to access to private healthcare. Everything is cheaper in Central and Eastern Europe. Of course, even within the region, as I said, prices vary greatly. In Prague, for example, services are not particularly cheap, and real estate prices in Moscow are higher than in many cities in Western Europe. But in most places in the region, you can get more bang for your buck than in more Western countries. Now let's talk about variety. Another huge advantage of Central and Eastern Europe is that you get a lot of variety. What do I mean by that? Some people have the false assumption that all of Central and Eastern Europe are made up of grey and dull cities with communist bloc buildings. That is absolutely not the case. From beautiful towns with Gothic and Baroque architecture like Český Krumlov in the Czech Republic to modern cities with a lot of tech startups like Tallinn in Estonia. You have something for every taste in Central and Eastern Europe. You also have white sand beaches in Albania, ski resort cities like Zakopane in Poland, and of course, if you really like ugly communist buildings, I don't even have to recommend you any specific place, as you will eventually find them. Now let's talk about taxes. Taxes are the next advantage we will discuss regarding Central and Eastern Europe. While this varies greatly from country to country, many states in Central and Eastern Europe have lower than average income tax rates, both at the corporate and at the individual level, if we compare all of Europe. Some countries in Central and Eastern Europe with attractive tax rates are Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, Bulgaria, Georgia, and Albania. Czechia and Hungary can also be an interesting option depending on your company structure. Estonia and Latvia, for example, are great if you want to create a high-growth startup, as you can defer taxes and reinvest in the company without having to pay income taxes every year, just eventually at some point in the future when your company is more well established. The next huge advantage of Central and Eastern Europe are residence permits. It is incomparably easier to get a residence permit in Central and Eastern Europe than it is in most countries in Western Europe, the US, Canada, Australia, Japan, and South Korea. Just for the fact that there are many countries in the region and each one of them has its own immigration laws, mathematically this would mean that there are many more options in Central and Eastern Europe than in the US or Canada, for example, which are just two countries with a lot of demand for immigration in North America. Although Canada has some different regulations by province, but anyway, that's not the topic of this video. As I said, different countries have different regulations, and if you want to know more about each country's regulations, you can watch our individual videos on each country. But let's talk about some of the most popular ways to actually get a residence permit in Central and Eastern Europe. One of the best ways is by opening a company, which is an option available in many countries such as Slovakia, Estonia, Serbia, and Romania. It is also possible to get a residence permit by being a freelancer in countries like the Czech Republic or Albania. Other countries will give you a residence permit if you buy property there, like Montenegro, Serbia, or Bosnia and Herzegovina. Then of course there are the more common residence permits if you are a student, if you marry a local, or if some local company offers you a job, for example. Now let's talk about the climate, which is not particularly an advantage of Central and Eastern Europe, but there are some misconceptions that I would like to explain here. Many people think that living in Central and Eastern Europe means having snow and darkness for 6 months a year. And while that is actually the case in many parts of the region, it doesn't apply to all of it. If you're not a fan of cold weather, the southern part of Central and Eastern Europe will definitely be more appealing. You can move to the coast of Albania, for example, where you will almost never see any snow. Other places with a pretty mild year-round climate are the coast of Croatia and the coast of Bulgaria. Apart from that, most countries in the region have 4 well-defined seasons. Autumn is especially beautiful in Central and Eastern Europe with its golden leaves. Spring, however, is the most pleasant time of the year. If you like extreme cold, you will always have the Baltic countries waiting for you. And of course, Mother Russia, which is the coldest country in the world. Another advantage of Central and Eastern Europe is that it is easy to travel around it. Apart from Russia, which is just huge and a good chunk of its territory is actually in Asia, the rest of Central and Eastern Europe is in a relatively small geographic area. The other advantage here is that the transport infrastructure is usually pretty good in the region, especially if you like traveling by train. In the Balkans, however, it is slightly more difficult as the region is quite mountainous and there are not as many railroads as in countries like Poland or Ukraine. Finally, traveling around the region is fairly inexpensive. A train ticket price in Poland can easily cost 3 times less than it would in France or Germany for the same distance traveled. The last important advantage of living in Central and Eastern Europe is the prevalence of English speakers in the region as a second language. The reason behind that is basically divided into 2 factors. Most of the countries in the region are relatively small, and their own language is usually spoken either in that small country or in that small country and slightly in other regions of nearby countries. Hungarian, for example, is spoken in Hungary and by some lesser communities in Romania and Slovakia. Lithuanian is mostly spoken just in Lithuania, and so on. For that reason, it is quite necessary for citizens of these countries to speak English, as even a short trip might land you in a country with a fairly different language. The second factor is that the average resident of Central and Eastern Europe is pretty well educated, increasing the chances of speaking more than one language. There is, however, one exception to that, which are countries with a high percentage of Russian speakers, such as Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine. In these countries, since the geographic distance to other countries is higher, it is harder to find a high percentage of English speakers, as most people, even if they travel, they are all speaking Russian, and in Ukraine either Russian or Ukrainian, which are both very similar Slavic languages. That's it for today's video. Write down in the comment section below to which country in Central or Eastern Europe would you like to move to, and the usual talk to finish the video, which is, if you want to travel, move, or invest abroad, hit the like button, check our other videos, book a consultation call with me, the link is in the description. Let's plan your immigration strategy together. And most importantly, subscribe. See you next time.